What's up, Isaiah?
Hey man, how's it going? I had two different things. One is I'm curious what you think about alternate states, places like El Salvador.
Oh shit. Oh, sorry about that. Can you? Sorry about that. Hey, sorry about that. I didn't know that. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you were talking about El Salvador. Sorry, my Twitter completely crashed. It's shocking that it would reconnect. I'm happy about that.
Rip. Yeah, I've had a lot of that today. I was just asking about what do you think of some of these alternate political setups that people are working on, stuff like El Salvador and Praxis Society is something that's started by a couple of ex-Bridgewater guys that they were wanting to set up in the Mediterranean somewhere and have like a blockchain like DAO governance society that's
Sure.
like pro-accelerationism, that sort of stuff. What are your thoughts on some of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Praxis fan. I've been over, their headquarters number of times and support what they do. And I think El Salvador is a really interesting experiment. People kind of don't like El Salvador for lots of other reasons. I've actually thought about my home country of Albania and Montenegro, kind of for both, I guess, as like another, which you mentioned, the Mediterranean, but other countries that want a new start, they kind of are kind of stuck in a rut, and embracing a new technology could usually that's what changes the fate of a country actually, and in addition to policy. So I think it's smart. The problem is these things play out over many decades. So people don't actually get to see the changes very quickly or easily, and some of them require a bit of pain. And that pain is generally kind of incentive for bad policy. People see the pain and they say, "Oh no, let's go back to the way it was. Let's fix this," and you can't fix it sometimes. Or the cure is worse than the disease. Whether it's handouts, entitlements, things like that. And you end up having a huge debt, and you end up having runaway interest payments, you end up having a worthless currency, and then there's no entitlements for anyone. That's sort of, we've seen that, and some of that stuff better than I do. But I think there's, got to be, sort of an answer to some of these things. And I think that the more America sort of chokes on bureaucracy and chokes on regulation, the kind of the worse that we get, and the more other countries get to catch up. And we have this very comfortable lead. That I think tends to have us get lazy and sort of get more socialist and get more entitlement driven, which is a shame because I think like we get embarrassed about our lead to some extent. I was looking at Japan's GDP per capita the other day, and I was shocked to see that it's I think slightly, maybe even contracted over the last time I really cared about this stuff, which is more than 10 years ago, while America's just goes up and up and up. And it's just a remarkable kind of like difference because of policy and other things like that. And you've even started to see countries in Europe start to diverge, as opposed to the sort of general like I don't know. They were all kind of like not very dispersed, and you're starting to see winners and losers even in Europe on GDP per capita, which again was really interesting. And I find it really like the American experiment has gone so well. But, the risk of slowing that down or changing it has led to other countries start to wonder if they can do it better. I think after the collapse of crypto, there's probably a bit of a mind virus in some people that, there is the right speed for these things and the wrong speed for these things, and crypto was kind of the wrong speed after we've sort of seen a lot of issues with crypto. But at the same time, there's a lot of issues with fiat, and the crypto philosophy has some benefit to it. So I don't know where things will go. I think the American system has sort of the best substrate for, excuse me, sort of getting at the answer there. Other countries seem to have a lot of other obstacles. I think El Salvador is probably not going to make it, to use crypto term, mostly because it's sort of not. And again, I'm not like a geopolitical expert or anything, but like it feels to me like the Banana Republic style turnaround is too much to bear on probably a people that are not ready to bear it yet. I give the guy credit for trying to do it, but there's still a lot of accusations that that country isn't exactly a whole lot more than a dictatorship. And so, I'm more excited about countries like Poland and others like that. Some of the countries in the Balkans like Croatia and Serbia as potentially being more dynamic places for innovation and freer markets and things like that. But those countries are also under Soviet and Chinese sway. So I don't know what place is better than America at the moment. But I do think, like, to the extent we hand more power to folks like Elizabeth Warren or people like that are really interested in regulation, really interested in using the state apparatus to sort of stamp out things that they don't like, we could see crypto and more importantly AI kind of get sort of dealt blows by the government. And if the stakes are really high, government can make gigantic mistakes, right? Vietnam is one reminder, but there are a number of others that policy-wise we can restrict some of the most important innovation. Again, Italy is restricting GPT, not really on serious grounds, thankfully. It seems like a very minor thing that could be corrected and then sort of cured. But if you look at Germany and what they're doing with like GDPR and other kind of like data protection and other sort of privacy metrics, like we're getting to a point where like I think Twitter is probably considering like exiting Germany and other websites have to think about like, well, is this so restrictive that we don't want internet? We don't want to provide service in these places, and I think that's really, we're getting to the brink for a lot of these sort of social and business and government sort of institutions that sort of have to interact with each other, and it'll be interesting to see like how the powers that be will how it all shakes out. And I think I have a lot of faith that in America we can't have things like a wealth tax or 80% income tax or really stringent regulations like regulations on AI, because somebody would throw up their hands and say, no, reason has to prevail. The problem is, if you look at the history of civilization, reason doesn't always prevail, and there's plenty of other countries that will self-inflicted wound themselves to oblivion. And there's countries that'll, like, some of the great empires of the past, like Britain and Netherlands and others, that maybe won't self-inflict themselves into oblivion, but they'll certainly cripple themselves. And I certainly don't want to be in the country that cripples itself. The problem is that I'm not sure you or I have much of a choice. Collectively we do. Collectively we can do a lot of things, but it's very hard to get people to act collectively. So, talking about it to some extent like is a little bit, frustrating. Like I think any macro person knows, like it's very hard to influence these things. Talking about them for me as more of a bottoms up person has always felt like a waste of time when, I could do an AI thing or, try to control my own destiny.
Yeah, I totally get it. The regulation stuff is interesting. I feel like America has this interesting position where we have gotten so far ahead and really have just been the most incredible economic engine in the history of the entire world. Really the most, the biggest wealth-creating engine in the history of the world for everybody. It's just given us this massive, massive advantage that we unfortunately are, like you said, becoming less competitive. We really have no rival. And so we can do stupider and stupider and stupider things. And unfortunately, it's eroding away this massive, massive head start we have. It's gonna be tough to see that lead dwindle. Even if it does take 50 years, I think it's a shame that it'll dwindle and that we don't have the guts to just, step on the pedal and go for round two. Like, I want to see America win for the next 500 years, and I want to see us increase that lead 1,000-fold, because every time we do, we create wealth for everybody. And so I think it's really sad to see, but it does seem somewhat inevitable.
I also, I wouldn't count us out just yet. I think there's people like I mentioned Vivek Ramaswamy once before, but people like Vivek, it doesn't have to be only Vivek, but people like Mark Andreessen, people like Peter Thiel maybe, people, who again are not the most popular people necessarily, but they're people that I think are real Americans in a lot of ways, that embody the best of America, that represent kind of this pioneering, swashbuckling kind of bootstrap sort of attitude. A lot of America that I don't like is very much an entitlement and handout state, very similar to Europe, where again, if everybody puts their hand out and nobody wants to be the one that's providing for each extended hand, there's nothing for anyone. And there's sort of this like very sort of weird sort of culture that starts to permeate, whether it's through media and so forth. So I see silver linings. For example, watching the media sort of collapse on itself is really interesting. Watching people sort of start to look for their own information, even if they're wrong sometimes. I personally think a lot of people don't really understand vaccines. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But I think that even if I disagree with the way people look at vaccines, I'm proud that people are willing to try to make up their own minds about things. And, this distrust of the media has been long overdue. And I'm happy that, the media has joined the government in the lowest ranks of folks' approval ratings, that we hold these institutions very low esteem now. And we're able to think for ourselves thanks to the internet. We're able to think for ourselves thanks to, all this innovation in technology. And, it's a good thing. So I don't count America out just yet. I think that AI, for example, a San Francisco company, creating possibly the next big economic engine after spreadsheets and operating systems. This is going to stand, in the Parthenon of American innovation, yet another hallowed hall where we'll see, GDP improvement that, again, outstrips every other country's. And they'll be able to use LLMs too, and I'm sure they'll figure it out. But again, some of their other policies, whether it's censorship or other forms of repression like China, they end up shooting themselves in the foot anyway. And those people will yearn for freedom the same way we do. So I think that we're still sitting pretty, and as long as there are people like Vivek that will do something about it, and people like us that'll at least think something about it and try to participate and make our opinions known. I can't tell you, for example, how many the biggest rock bands, rappers, billionaires have, after I come out of prison, said, Martin, I've privately always said I supported you. I just couldn't publicly risk doing it. And I'm sort of sitting there like, well, that's very nice of you. Yeah, it's right.
Everyone just said something. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's like really nice of you to say, but at the same time, the stakes aren't important for me. I'm just one guy. It don't matter. But if everyone thinks, again, I'm not going to pick too much of a hot button, but if everyone thinks that, we shouldn't be woke or something like that, but everyone's afraid to say it because they'll get canceled or something like that, that's a problem. And I think that the great solution here has been this defanging of the media, this defanging of some of these entities and institutions. Even Netflix has decided for its own sake to say, we're going to let Chappelle do his thing. And if you don't like that, quit Netflix. We don't care. And it took a lot of courage to do that, to be frank. And I don't think Netflix is exactly the most courageous company on the planet. But, I think that, some of these uprisings, which it's ridiculous to put it that way, but an uprising is what? A counter-reaction to oppression. So they're sort of uprisings against sort of some of these pressures. Again, whether you feel what you feel about me is maybe not that important, of course, but I feel this oppression against capitalism of hey, it's my product, I bought it, it's my price, it's up to me. You don't like my price, it is what it is. That's maybe some people take an extreme form of kind of freedom, but it's freedom anyway. And I think that, you can pick something a lot more mundane if you want to sort of compare itself to, if you have the freedom to say that, you don't like, you can say something very mundane or very extreme, but if you don't like, children watching drag shows or something like that, and you're afraid to say that because you think that, you're going to get canceled, or you don't like the latest ambassador for Bud Light or something like that that's been controversial. Again, I personally don't give a crap, but if that's something you care about and you want to talk about it, I think you should be able to talk about it. And I think that, that culture of fear is something that I know Vivek, I sound like I'm stumping for him, but, I think that it's something that, Vivek has explicitly talked about. And I still feel like people like Trump...
This space paid for by Vivek.
Yeah, exactly, right? I feel like Trump and like other like some of these other Republicans, and I'm a Republican, like they haven't done a great job of being anything but like that first generation politician of like, what do I have to say to win this thing? You know, that's sort of still the prevailing attitude, and I think that like even people on the left, you know, I think that authenticity of argument is something that, you know, we're all kind of looking for. When we look at Elon, somebody that, you know, is pretty authentic. You know, this isn't somebody that like pulls any punches or edits himself. He's becoming one of the most liked people out there, still polarizing, but liked nevertheless because he's not afraid to sort of say what he wants, including clapping back at Joe Biden or a senator or, you know, something like that, which is the way most of us would act if we got $100 billion or $200 billion. That's exactly how we'd act, and I sort of take pride in seeing that he's not afraid of doing that because, like I said earlier, it's not hard to find a law in the law book that you're violating and go take you to town. So I really, you know, I think that, you know, those are the types of people that we look up to in this country, and the more of them that we can put up in a pedestal and congratulate and reward and adulate and just support, maybe is the best word, I think the better. Vivek is someone that comes to mind because, you know, we've crossed paths a lot. But, you know, other people like that, you know, aren't afraid of their own shadow. They're bold. They make mistakes, but they take accountability for who they are and what they're doing. I think those are the kinds of people that the more that we support them, the more that they get into places of power and influence, and the more that we get the country we want, as opposed to like a culture of fear, a culture of regulation, a culture of being ashamed of success, being...
I'm curious in your own personal story.